So this happened a few years ago when my daughter was around 4 years old. My daughter started talking about her friend, Emily. After hearing stories about Emily, I concluded she wasn't a real person. I just chalked it up to my daughter's imagination, as she was creative. One day I was home alone, just having coffee and watching TV, when I heard my daughter's toys going off. They were all the sort that had to be pressed and pushed to make noise. I got up and went to her room. Along with the toys going off, the light on her small fish tank was on, even though I knew I had turned it off. I was a bit freaked out. I noticed it was time to go pick my daughter up from school, so I switched the light off and left. On the way home, I thought I'd talk to her about Emily. She started telling me a lot of details, like Emily is 18 and has long brown hair, and her full name is Emily Rose Ward, and she died when she got sick. My great-grandma's surname was Ward, and I knew she had 2 sisters. One of her sisters was named Emily and died of tuberculosis when she was 18. I'm now convinced she was my daughter's friend during this time. I've never told this story to anyone, as my family are very much if you can't see it, feel it, or hear it, it doesn't exist. I was at my cousin's wake back in July of 2017 when I suddenly had this constant feeling to keep looking at him in his casket. Whenever I would turn away or get distracted, there was this feeling to keep watching him. I knew he was dead. I could smell the faint scent of death on him. He'd been dead for at least 11 days by the time his wake was held. I was watching him in his casket when suddenly I felt a jolt of electricity that ran through me. At the same time, the lamp at the foot of his casket dimmed. I quickly looked back at my cousin and saw his fingers move. His hands were placed in the usual top hand over bottom hand position. Suddenly, he quickly flexed his middle, ring, and pinky fingers of his left hand. It reminded me of when he would pop his knuckles. His left hand fingers then flexed the OK position for like half a second. This all happened within seconds, and I have no idea of how to explain what I saw that day. In autumn of 2018, I broke my left foot and it required surgery. I lived in a not-so-nice neighborhood in southwest Detroit. Due to my surgery, I had been staying with family while I recuperated. After the first few days, I drove home to gather some clothes and planned on staying there and driving back to my family's house the next day. I crutched into my house and was simultaneously talking with a friend that called moments before. I really needed to pee, and with the phone nestled between my ear and shoulder, I made my way to the bathroom. With me talking and the noise of the crutches, I thought I was hearing noises from my attic, but it wasn't until I got into my bathroom and stopped that I was sure someone or something was upstairs. I said to my friend something along the lines of, "Hang on a second, there's something upstairs." The initial split-second thought was an animal in the house. No sooner than I said that, the loudest boom came down on the floor. It seemed to be directly above me. It sounded like the weight of a full-grown man. Here are some details about the attic. The attic could have been converted into a bedroom that went the full length of the house, and I'm 6 feet tall, and I could stand up right if I was in the middle. My friend on the phone was immediately surprised and also heard the loud noise. She thought I had fallen. I told her it wasn't me and that someone probably broke in. I hurried to the front door and was expecting someone to come busting out of my house somewhere. I put the phone back to my ear and told my friend I would call her back so I could deal with the situation. Not even a second after hanging up my phone, a police cruiser turned out of an alley onto my block. I quickly waved it down. These weren't the typical police. Like I said, this wasn't the greatest area. It was an unmarked police car with plain-clothed officers. I explained what had just happened, how I had just come home and thought someone was in my house. 4 policemen, weapons drawn, embarked throughout my house. They got to the stairs and called out, "Detroit Police," several times and headed up. I waited at the bottom, and in a minute or so they made their descent and told me nobody's there. As quickly as they entered, they made their exit. I thanked them and they drove away. Now at most, 8 minutes had lapsed, and I am trying to digest everything. I wondered what the hell I had heard. Not even 20 seconds went by when I heard a dragging sound. It started at the rear of the attic and grew louder as it got close to the middle. The sound was right above me and I heard the loudest crash yet. It was like someone was trying to crash right through the floor to me. I left back to my family's place. When I was 23, I started getting into online dating and met a girl that I started talking to pretty frequently. Eventually, I went over to her place to spend some time with her and her family. At the doorway, she stopped me and said, "There's only one rule at my house. Don't knock on the walls because they knock back." We had talked about the paranormal, but she never really went into great detail about her house. I agreed, and we, along with her friend, her brother, and his friend, were smoking and chatting for a few hours until the girl I was with said she had to run to the store. While she was out, I couldn't help myself and dared her brother's friend to knock on the wall because he was the only one that didn't know about the rule, and he immediately did. Everyone in the room went quiet for a moment, and when nothing noticeable happened, we began talking again, until we heard what sounded like someone aggressively pushing her dresser. Her brother jumped up frantically and said, "What the heck was that?" We all sat there quietly to see if anything else would happen, and slowly worked our way back into conversation. When she got back, she joined us in conversation until she got this look on her face. She kinda cocked her head to the side slightly as if someone was whispering in her ear and just blurted out, "Who knocked on my wall?" Nobody had touched their phone the entire time we were sitting there. There's no possible way she could have known that someone had knocked on her wall. That still creeps me out, no matter how many times I tell that story. My experiences as a funeral director. Due to my profession, I come across the dead and anything related more often than your average Joe. In the past 8 years, I've been working as a funeral director here in Germany. My colleagues and I have experienced numerous unexplainable things that stuck with us. Out of these, I'd like to share one with you today that was as clear as day and surely not my imagination. This story begins at the end of a pickup in the middle of the night, around 2 a.m. We had just finished rolling the casket into the cooling unit and were sitting by the desk around the corner filling in our nighttime sheets. You need to know that our hygienic area and the makeshift office are separated by our cache of caskets waiting to be put to use. The light there is always off, so all the lighting you get is the faint shimmer of cold white light coming from the hygienic area. I looked to my left as I finished writing my timesheet and was startled to see a dark figure standing right on the walkway between the caskets, illuminated from the back by the mentioned light. I slowly poked my colleague to look. He also saw the figure, and after a few seconds of blank staring, I called out to it, thinking it was one of our other colleagues maybe. No answer, so I called out a second time. Yet again, nothing. Since we had intruders in the funeral home before, both of us got up and slowly walked towards the figure, further calling out to it. About halfway towards the figure, it suddenly turned away and audibly walked out of sight towards the cooling unit. My colleague and I quickly followed, but as we got around the corner, nothing was there. The big back door was still locked, and the only window was barred up and cluttered with stuff anyways. Out of fear of an actual intruder, we looked around, searching anywhere, but gave up eventually. Both of us are sure we saw a ghost that night, since it was too clear to just be some shadow. I'd be happy to hear your thoughts on that, because we are still looking for some explanation.